Hey to all the spooks out there. Welcome back to another episode of Spine Chilling Chats, where every Wednesday we dig up the darkest corners of true crime, history, folklore, and the supernatural. I'm Ange.
And I'm Amanda.
This week we're diving into one of the most chilling chapters in American history, the harrowing tale of the Donner Party. What started as a hopeful journey westward turned into a frozen nightmare of starvation, isolation, and unthinkable choices. How did nearly 90 pioneers become trapped in the Sierra Nevada mountains? What went wrong on the so-called shortcut that sealed their fate? And how far would you go to survive? Join us as we separate fact from folklore and uncover the dark truths behind the infamous tragedy. Grab a blanket. This story will give you chills.
So I have heard people say Donner Party of Five or Donner Party or this or that. Like, I don't know
The story?
the story. I don't know anything about it. I don't know why people say it. Like, I know nothing.
Well, you's going to find out today.
I don't know if I want to. Yours are always so, it makes me sad and makes me want to throw up.
This one isn't so bad as, like Albert Fish that we played last week,
But you said you cried.
I cried because it's sad, because of the choices of what happened, the desperation. You're going to hear all about it, but it was sad. I did cry while writing this because it is sad. It is sad. And it's, to think that people went through these things,
Yeah. And like, why? That comes down to any person that we've covered, but not just us. Any person that has done terrible, terrible things as far as mass murderers and serial killers and rapists and just everybody. Like, why? It boils down to why.
Well, this isn't like that.
Oh,
this isn't. I mean, there is murder, but it's not what you think.
Also, I wanted to say that our hearts go out to all the shooting victims. There was 2 that died and a couple, I think 6 or 7 that got shot and injured at the Florida State University shooting that just happened. Like, what, a week ago? A couple days ago?
I don't remember.
But yeah, so we're really sorry to hear about all that. And it was a terrible, terrible, terrible thing.
Yeah. All right, well, let's get into it.
I'm excited, but I'm not.
Settlers started migrating west in large numbers, leaving the safety of the East Coast for the Oregon Territory and California in the search of vast, fertile farmland. There were only 2 options for reaching them, and that was either taking the long way around by ocean or the challenging journey across land via wagons. Most of the
Oregon Trail.
Yeah. You say Oregon?
I say Oregon.
I say Oregon.
Oregon.
But
it's Oregon. Oregon? That's how it's spelled.
It is how it's spelled. Huh. I don't know. I've always pronounced it Oregon.
Let us know how you guys pronounce it.
Most of the wagon trains, as they call them, because all the wagons follow behind one another.
Another thing, did you ever play it in school?
I've played it maybe once. That was a little bit before me.
It was, because it was definitely me.
I was a little too young when that was really
Maybe
popular.
It was just getting out of circulation when you were.
Yeah.
But there's a new one out.
Oh, I'm sure that.
Oh, yeah.
It's been
remade.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me.
Yeah. Okay, anyway.
Most of the wagon trains, as they called them, traveled by the Oregon Trail route that started in Independence, Missouri to the Continental Divide, traveling around 15 miles a day with the entire journey taking 4 to 6 months. The trail generally followed rivers to the South Pass. This was a mount pass in what today is Wyoming, which I've seen pictures of Wyoming. I've never been, but man, is it beautiful.
I don't think I've seen pictures of Wyoming.
Oh my gosh.
Isn't that where Yellowstone is?
Fuck if I know.
No, the show Yellowstone.
Oh, I've never seen the show.
Oh, I don't. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's.
I would assume the show's named
Yellowstone because
Yellowstone.
of Yellowstone Park. Yeah. I thought so too, but I don't know.
It was a fairly easy route for the wagons to use. The early pioneers then had a few choice routes to continue to their destinations. Lansford Hastings, who made the trek from Ohio to the west, published a guide to encourage settlers to head that way. He gave an alternate route from the Oregon Trail's standard route through Idaho's Snake River Plain. He gave directions of a more direct route, which in reality added 125 treacherous miles to the trip. Yeah, some shortcut, huh?
Yeah, what in the world?
His route would have settlers travel through the Wasatch Range and across the Great Salt Lake Desert, which that just sounds really happy, doesn't it? Great
Desert.
Salt Lake Desert.
Salt already like, ugh. And
yeah,
then you have
so you just know it's inhabitable.
You know, it's terrible.
Even though he himself had never traveled any part of this proposed shortcut. That is until early 1846 when he traveled from California to Fort Bridger, which was a little supply station run by Jim Bridger in Black's Fork, Wyoming. Lansford stayed at the little fort to convince travelers to turn south onto his route. He was the second documented person to have ever crossed the southern part of the Great Salt Lake Desert, but he nor the other person had been accompanied by wagons. So they just did it either by horse or...
I was going to say, then how do they do it?
Yeah, just... I would assume they rode a horse. Yeah,
but just them?
Yeah, so they didn't have like these big wagons. They had to try to maneuver across the terrain.
Okay.
The hardest part of the trek to California was the last 100 miles, which had you cross the Sierra Nevada. The mountain range has 500 distinct peaks, over 12,000 feet high, and because of its height and where it is in relation to the Pacific Ocean, it received more snow than most of the other ranges in North America, making the timing for the expeditions extremely important to ensure that it would not be, one, a muddy mess due to spring rains, or two, buried in massive snowdrifts in the mountains from September onward. They had to make sure the horses and oxen had plenty of grass to eat because that's their, that's not only their potential food source, but they're moving. Like this is their livelihood, all their oxen. So they had to make sure they survive. Around 500 wagons got on the Oregon Trail and headed out west from Independence, Missouri in the spring of 1846. At the end of the wagon train, there was a group of 9 wagons that contained 32 members of the Reed and Donner families and their employees that had come from Springfield, Illinois. The Donner family consisted of George Donner, who was around 60 years old, which seemed kind of old to me.
Considering the time.
Yeah, 1846, I didn't think people were...
past 30s, 40s.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But apparently. He also had his 44-year-old wife, Tamsin. There are 3 daughters, Frances, who was 6, 4-year-old Georgia, and little 3-year-old Eliza. There was also George's daughters from a previous marriage with him, Alitha, who was 14, and Leanna, who was 12. George's younger brother, Jacob, who was 56, along with his wife, Elizabeth, who was 45. Stepsons, Solomon, who was 14, and William Hook, who was 12. Then there were their 5 children together. George, who was 9, which that's kind of weird to name your son after your brother, like when your brother's still alive. Like, because what if he had a son later on and wanted a junior?
He could still name him Junior, but maybe they just have different middle names.
That's weird to me.
Like George John
to have
Junior, and then the other one's like George.
But to have cousins named the same name, that's weird.
That's true too. Yeah.
That's weird. But whatever. But George was 9, Mary was 7, Isaac was 6, Louis 4, and then little 1-year-old Samuel. They also had their teamsters traveling with them who were in charge of the wagons. Hiram O. Miller was 29, Samuel Shoemaker was 25, Noah James was only 16, Charles Berger was 30, John Denton was 28, and Augustus Gloop, just kidding, Augustus Spitzer, 30. And thanks to our friends Too Close to Home.
Yes, shout out to you guys. Thank you for everything.
I posted a little screenshot of me editing this episode, and they actually read what I was writing, and they saw my little Augustus Gloop joke in there. So thank you guys for all of your support. We really appreciate it.
Okay, who's Augustus Gloop? I know.
Oh,
but you know how we have to explain
gosh.
stuff to the younger people.
Yeah, but they had the Johnny Depp.
Yeah, but it's a character.
Willy Wonka.
From Willy Wonka.
Yes.
Or Wonka. Or Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory.
Charlie and the Chocolate
Factory. Like, one of those movies, just watch it. You'll get it.
Fun fact, that was one of my favorite movies, like the original Gene Wilder movie. That was my favorite movie in like middle school, high school. And so my Sweet 16, I had a Willy Wonka themed Sweet 16 party, and we had a gold balloon, and my mom filled it with Hershey Kisses, and we played Pass the Golden Goose Egg. Like, and we had Willy Wonka trivia and a bunch of other stuff.
Oh, that's
and my mom
cute.
made a Pure Imagination room cake, so it had the little chocolate river, and it had suckers and stuff sticking up.
That's cute.
I'm a dork. The Reed family consisted of James F. Reed, who was 45, his wife Margaret, who was 32, stepdaughter Virginia, who was 13, daughter Martha Jane, who went by Patty, and she was 8. Then they had their sons James, who was 5, and Thomas, who was 3. Margaret's mother, Sarah Keyes, also accompanied them on this journey. Sarah, unfortunately, was in the advanced stages of tuberculosis and died at a campsite they named Alcove Springs. They buried her body nearby, off to the side of the trail, and placed a gray rock inscribed with Mrs. Sarah Keyes, died May 29th, 1846, aged 70.
So that sucks because they're moving, so they just have to stop and bury their dead people in random places, and it's not like you can, but it's not like you can go back and visit whenever you want, like, or have a fight. Like, I don't know.
My thing is, okay, she had tuberculosis. Isn't that highly contagious?
Yeah.
So why would you bring her along? What if she infects everybody else?
That's a good point.
The Reed family were leaving financial worries behind in Springfield and had hoped that the climate in California would help Margaret, who had been sickly for a while. They hired 3 men to drive the oxen teams: Milford Milt Elliott, who was 28, James Smith, who was 25, and Walter Huron, who was 25. Bayless Williams, 24, came along as the handyman of the group and brought his sister Eliza, who was 25, and she would act as the family's cook. Which they must not be that hard financially if they're hiring help. Yeah. So I don't know what financial worries they were leaving behind in Springfield, but it couldn't have been too bad. A few days after setting off from Independence, the 2 families joined a group of 50 wagons led by William H. Russell. By the 16th of June, the group had traveled 450 miles, with 200 more miles to go before they hit Fort Laramie. The rainy weather had delayed them, making the river rise. Mrs. Donner wrote to a friend in Springfield, and this is a quote, "Indeed, if I do not experience something far worse than I have yet done, I shall say the trouble is all in getting started."
Is that how you think they talked?
Yeah, it's not 1846.
Okay.
Virginia Reed recalled many years later that during the very beginning of the journey, she was perfectly happy. Several other families joined the wagon train along the way, making for an impressive-sized group. Lansford Hastings sent riders out to find traveling migrants and give them letters warning them of opposition from the Mexican authorities in California and advising them to band together in large groups. He also promoted his new and improved route to California and that he would be waiting at Fort Bridger to guide them along the new cutoff. On July 12th, the Reed and Donner families received one of these letters. The large group made their way to Little Sandy River. Luke Halloran, a young man with tuberculosis. See, everybody's got it. Everybody's got tuberculosis.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Could no longer ride horseback. The families he had been traveling with no longer had resources to care for him. He was taken in by George Donner at Little Sandy River and rode in their wagon with them. On July 20th, the majority of the wagon trains decided to follow the established trail via Fort Hall, but a small group decided to try out Fort Bridger. The small group would need a leader. James Reed had military experience, but he was a bit of a dick. George Donner, on the other hand, was really laid back, kind, and easy to get along with. This made him the group's first choice. The group didn't have any experience in long, challenging travels. Also, they had very little, if any, experience on how to interact with the indigenous people that they would no doubtedly meet along the way.
Yeah.
Journalist Edwin Bryant made it to Black's Fork about a week before the Donner Party. He saw the first part of the trail and thought it was too treacherous for the wagons in the Donner Party, especially with it having so many women and children in it. He returned to Black's Fork and left letters warning members of the group not to take Hastings' shortcut. When the Donner Party finally reached Black's Fork on the 27th of July, Hastings had already taken off with 40 wagons of the Harlan Young group. Jim Bridger told the party that the shortcut was a smooth trip without rugged country or hostile indigenous people, and shortening the trip by 350 miles. He did say that water would be easy to find along the way, although there would be a couple of days they'd have to cross a 30 to 40 mile dry lake bed. Having people take the route brought a ton of money into his trading post, so he withheld the truth. So he didn't tell them about the letters that the other dude sent,
saying don't
take it. Your wagons aren't going to make it.
Ooh, you just run.
He was greedy there. And unfortunately,
he wanted money.
Yeah, he wanted more people to take his route. Well, not his route, but take the route that led them right to his little supply station.
Mm-hmm.
James Reed was excited with all the good news and really pushed for them to take Hastings' cutoff. The party didn't receive any of Edwin Bryant's letters of warning. In his diary account, he stated that Jim Bridger purposely hid the letters in order to get more people to go through his trading post. While at Fort Laramie, James Reed met an old friend, James Kleiman, who was just coming back from California. He warned James Reed not to take Hastings' cutoff. He told him that the wagons wouldn't be able to make it, and Hastings' information was wrong. Tamsin Donner didn't want to take Hastings' cutoff and thought of him to be a selfish adventurer. Within a few days of turning south to take Hastings' cutoff, the party found the terrain was much more difficult than what Hastings had described. The drivers were forced to lock the wheels on the wagons to stop them from rolling down steep inclines. The Oregon Trail had been worn to an easy and obvious path from years of traffic using it, but Hastings' cutoff was hard to see. Like, you're just plowing through your own way, basically. There's no actual path to follow.
Yeah.
Lansford Hastings wrote down directions and nailed them to trays. Like, that's a foolproof way to get to somewhere.
Right.
Let's hope you come across this tree and that the paper that your instructions didn't blow off or get rained on.
Or some bear came and used it as a scratching post.
On the 16th of August, the Donner family found a letter from him advising them to stop and wait for him to show them a different route than what the Harlan Young party had taken, because apparently that route was too difficult. James Reed, Charles T. Stanton, and William Pike rode ahead to find Lansford Hastings. They came across exceedingly difficult canyons where boulders had to be moved and walls cut off precariously to the river below. So, like, boop, you could accidentally just fall right in.
Wow.
The wagons were sure to break if they tried this path. Hastings had promised to guide them around the more difficult areas, but in reality, he only rode back a little way and pointed out the general direction they were to go. He's a real dick.
He's a piece of work.
Yeah, like, he fucked these people so bad.
Wow.
It was so bad. James Reed rode back to the party alone while Stanton and Pike stayed there to rest. The group had to then decide whether to turn back to rejoin the traditional trail, follow the tracks left by the Harlan Young party through the hard terrain of Weber Canyon, or to make their own path in the direction that Lansford Hastings had pointed out. Reed urged the group to press onward on Hastings' route. Their progress was slow, only making it 1.5 miles a day.
Oh my gosh.
They had to have all of the able-bodied men clear away brush, trees, and rocks to make way for the wagons.
So I'm wondering, if they're going through this and they don't want to turn back and do the other routes, do they think that the other routes are worse off?
I think they're just not wanting to waste time having to backtrack. Because, it's they're on a time crunch.
Yeah.
Because they have to make it through this pass before winter.
Yeah.
You're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. Alas, they made it through the Wasatch Mountains. They ran into the Graves family and combined the two groups, bringing their total to 87 members with 60 to 80 wagons, which that's still an impressive amount of people. 60 to 80 wagons?
Yeah. 87 members? That's
a lot.
Yeah.
They could finally see the Great Salt Lake by August 20th. The men of the group began arguing about whose fault it was in choosing this route. As food and supplies began to run out for some of the less wealthy families, tempers and fears were running high. Stanton and Pike, who had ridden out with James Reed, had gotten lost trying to find their way back. By the time the party found the men, they were a day away from eating their horses to survive. Like, already.
Jesus.
Like, it's difficult to survive in this, if you don't know what you're doing. Like, I don't think I would have survived. I don't know how to hunt.
No. Yeah, like, what do you do?
Even trying to forage for, like, berries and shit. Like, I don't know what's poisonous.
No.
I don't.
It's 1840 something, right?
1846, yeah.
Let's just pull out our book and look up the berries that are poisonous and not poisonous.
And this is a whole different area than they're used to. They're from Illinois and Missouri, and this is a whole different area where they don't even know. On the 25th of August, Luke Halloran passed away from tuberculosis.
Oh, imagine that.
Yeah. A few days later, they came across a tattered letter from Hastings. So there you go, tattered letter. So hopefully they were able to read it. The pieces indicated there were 2 days and nights of difficult travel ahead without grass or water. The party rested their oxen and prepared for the trip. They had a large, barren plain ahead of them, perfectly flat and covered in white salt, larger than the one they had just gotten across. The oxen were tired and their water was almost gone. But they pressed on in unbelievable conditions. The moisture underneath the salt crust rose to the surface with the high temperatures, turning the salt into this gummy, sticky mess. The wagon wheels would sink into it. The days were sweltering and the nights were freezing because it's a desert.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how the deserts are, you know. After 3 days, the water was gone, and some of the party took the oxen off the wagons to ride ahead in search of more water. 9 of the 10 oxen that Reed had, they broke free, mad with thirst, taking off into the desert. Many of the other families' cattle and horses took off as well. Some of the wagons were damaged from the animals, going wild.
Stampeding them and whatnot.
Leaving the party in a compromised position. No one had any faith left in the Hastings cutoff as they finally reached the springs on the other side of the desert. They spent several days there trying to recover cattle, retrieve wagons left in the desert, and transfer their remaining food and supplies to the other wagons that were still in operating condition. James Reed's family suffered the most losses, and to compensate, he became even more assertive and domineering. He had all the families submit an inventory of their goods and food to him, like he's the boss.
But when the other families were running low on supplies, did they share with them?
I doubt it. James also suggested that 2 men ride ahead to Sutter's Fort in California. He had heard that John Sutter was very generous to wayward pioneers and would assist them with extra food and supplies. Charles Stanton and William McCutcheon volunteered for this dangerous journey. The remaining wagons that were in working condition were pulled by hodgepodge teams of the cows, oxen, and mules that were left, which must have sucked because, unlike horses, I can't imagine cows are trained to be steered by reins. So how are you steering?
And cows are stubborn. So are horses. But yeah, people train horses. Can you train cows?
I don't know. I don't know. So I can't imagine that was easy. And it must have taken them forever to get anywhere. It was the middle of September by now, and the 2 men who had gone in search of some of the missing oxen reported back that another 40 miles of desert lay ahead. The cattle and oxen were exhausted by this time and had lost a ton of weight. But the Donner Party crossed the next portion of the desert without any major issues. Their journey seemed to be on the upswing, getting easier, particularly through the valley next to the Ruby Mountains. They had no choice but to follow Lansford Hastings' tracks that were weeks old by this point, despite their near hatred for the man. On September 26, 2 months after they started their journey on the Hastings Cutoff, they finally rejoined the traditional trail along a stream that became known as the Humboldt River. The supposed shortcut had extended their journey by an entire month.
Yeah, that's the shortcut I like.
Yeah. They ran into Paiute indigenous people along the Humboldt River who ended up stealing and shooting several of the party's oxen and horses. It was well into October now, and the Donner families split up into smaller groups to make better time. 2 of the wagons got tangled up, and John Snyder angrily beat the oxen of Reed's hired teamster. 2 of the wagons got tangled up, and John Snyder angrily beat the oxen of Reed's hired teamster, Milt Elliott. James Reed tried to intervene, but when John started to beat James in the head with a whip handle, James' wife tried to stop him, and then he struck her as well. So James retaliated by stabbing John Snyder to death. The witnesses gathered to figure out what was to happen to James. American laws weren't applicable west of the Continental Divide in what was the Mexican territory at the time. Wagon trains typically administered their own justice. So George Donner, who had been elected the leader of the party, he was a full day's ride ahead of the main wagon train with his family. So the witnesses that had seen John Snyder hitting James, and some even had seen him hit James's wife too. Unfortunately, John was very popular within the group, whereas no one really liked James because he, again, was a dick.
So they're probably like good riddance.
Yeah, so Keseberg wanted James to be hanged, but they eventually compromised by banishing James from the party, but allowed his wife and family to stay. They were to be taken care of by the others, which honestly, that was very generous of them since the party already had diminished supplies. They could have just kicked the whole family out. But being a wife myself, it would be so hard not to go with my husband. But I want to be, I'd want to be with Robbie, but I would also have to think about Rory, my baby in mind.
Yeah.
And it would be safer for her if we stayed with the group.
Mm-hmm.
But what a hard...
Yeah, I would be the same
choice.
way. I would be torn if I was married. I'd want to go with my husband. I want to support my husband. I want to be with my husband, but I have a child, and it would be safer for the child if we went in the group because there are supplies and more people and more protection.
Than just roughing it with nothing.
Yeah.
Absolutely nothing.
So that'd be a hard decision.
Especially since he had been protecting himself and his wife from someone who was beating them. The real lesson here is don't be a dick to people who may have your life in the palm of their hands in the future. So,
yeah.
James left all alone the next morning, unarmed and without supplies. But his stepdaughter, Virginia, secretly rode ahead and gave him a rifle and some food.
Oh, it was nice.
Yeah. The Donner party had splintered off into smaller groups, each looking out for themselves and distrustful of the others. The animals were becoming weak, with the grass becoming more scarce. To lessen the animals' loads, everyone was expected to walk instead of riding in the wagons. The ruthless Keseberg, the one that wanted to hang James, made an elderly man named Hardcoop get out of the wagon too, telling him to walk or die.
Oh, that's terrible.
A few days later, the old man sat next to a stream, his feet so swollen they had split open. He was never seen again. William Eddy pleaded with the others to search for him, but everyone refused, not wanting to waste their time and precious resources on an almost 70-year-old man.
I thought they were talking like he was 90. I forgot that
is old.
Back then,
Yeah.
that is 90.
Yeah.
Okay.
James Reed caught up with the Donners and, after explaining what happened, carried on ahead with one of his teamsters, Walter Huron. The two men shared a horse and were able to cover 25 to 40 miles per day. The rest of the party caught up with the Donners as well, but their hardships continued. Indigenous people chased away all of the Graves' family's horses, and another wagon had to be left behind. With grass being so scarce, the cattle spread out more. This unfortunately allowed the Paiute tribe to steal 18 more cattle during one evening, and several mornings later, they shot 21 more.
Jeez.
The company had lost nearly 100 oxen and cattle so far in their travels, and their food and supplies were almost completely depleted. When nearly all of his cattle gone, Wolfinger stopped at the Humboldt Sink to stow away his wagon. Reinhardt and Spitzer stayed behind to help him. They returned a little later without him. They had been attacked by the Paiutes, and he had been killed. There was still one more stretch of desert for them to cross. The Eddy's oxen had been killed by the Paiutes as well, and they had to leave behind their wagon. The family had eaten all of their rations, and the other families refused to share, even with the children.
See,
but
I get it.
Yeah, you got to worry, is my family going to have enough?
Yeah.
Are my children going to be able to eat?
Yeah.
This whole
dog world
is a horrible situation. Like, you can't even theorize what you would do because you just don't know unless you're in that situation. Yeah. The Eddies were forced to walk, carrying their children, starved and dying of thirst. Margaret Reed and her children were also without a wagon at this point. Thankfully, the desert soon turned into a lush and beautiful country of the Truckee River. Still, the company had little time to rest. They had to press on. They were in a race to cross the Sierra Nevada before the snow came, making it impossible. Stanton, who had left the month before to look for help in California, found the group. He brought mules and food from Sutter's Fort, along with 2 indigenous men who John Sutter employed to guide them. So I'm sure they're like, oh, thank gosh. Like, yeah, finally some help.
At least somebody cares.
Stanton, who had left the month before to look for help in California, found the group. He brought mules and food from Sutter's Fort, along with 2 indigenous men who John Sutter employed to guide them. These Miwok men from the Cosumnes River area were known by their Catholic conversion names, Luis and Salvador. Stanton also brought the group news that Reed and Heron, although worn and starving, had reached Sutter's Fort. The group knew that this last push over the mountains that were known to be so much worse than the already difficult Wasatch Range they had already crossed, the Donner Party had to decide whether they should continue ahead or let their cattle rest. It was already October 20th, and they were told that the pass, which is now known as Donner Pass, would not be snowed in until the middle of November, giving them roughly a little less than a month to cross. William Pike was killed when a gun being loaded by William Foster was discharged negligently, then made the decision for them. They resumed their journey, family by family. The Breens took off first, shortly followed by the Keysburg, Reeds, Graves, and the Murphys. The Donners traveled last. After a few miles traversing through the rough terrain, an axle on one of their wagons broke. Jacob and George went into the woods to make a replacement. George accidentally sliced his hand open while he was chiseling the wood, but it didn't seem too deep.
That's probably going to turn into a problem. I don't know. Guys, I don't know. I'm just saying because it's 1846, and there's no fucking modern day medicine. So and people are traveling with highly contagious tuberculosis. So they can't be too smart.
And they have no soap, no clean water. Yeah.
Yeah. So here we go.
The snow started to fall. The Breens made it up the nearly vertical slope 1,000 feet to Truckee Lake, now known as Donner Lake.
Oh, I've heard of that lake.
Yeah, this is why.
Well, now I know why.
3 miles from the pass summit. They camped near a cabin that had been built 2 years earlier by members of the Stevens Townsend Murphy party. The Eddies and the Keysburgs joined the Breens, attempting to make it over the pass, but they were met with 5 to 10 foot snow drifts and weren't able to find the trail. They had to turn back for Truckee Lake, and within a day, all the families were camping there except for the Donners. They were 5 miles, about half a day's journey below them. The 60 members of the Breen, Graves, Reed, Murphy, Keysburg, and Eddy families set up in the 3 widely separated pine log cabins for the winter. The cabins had dirt floors and flat roofs that leaked every time it rained. The Breens took up one cabin, the Eddies and Murphys shared another, and the Reeds and Graves shared the third. Keysburg built a lean-to for his family against the side of the Breen cabin, which I cannot even imagine how insufficient of a dwelling that would be with snow coming down.
Yeah.
The party used canvas and oxhide to patch the leaky roofs. The cabins had no windows or doors. They just had one large hole to allow entry in.
Oh my gosh.
There were 60 people total at Truckee Lake. 19 men over the age of 18, 12 women, and 29 children, 6 of which were toddlers or younger. They were in for a rough time.
And it was only 3 cabins and a lean-to?
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
In the snow.
In the snow.
In
Jesus.
the snow. No heat. No. Like I said, yeah.
That's crazy.
A little down the trail, close to Alder Creek, the Donner families quickly built tents to fit the 21 members of their party, including Mrs. Wolfinger and the Donner's drivers. 6 men, 3 women, and 12 children total. It started to snow again on the evening of November 4th, the beginning of a storm that would last 8 days. Very little food was left from what Stanton had brought back from Sutter's Fort. The oxen began to die, and their carcasses were frozen and stacked. Truckee Lake hadn't frozen over yet, but the pioneers were unfamiliar with catching lake trout. Mr. Eddy, who was the most experienced hunter of the group, killed a bear, which is super impressive, but didn't have much luck after that. The Reed and Eddy families had lost almost everything. Margaret Reed promised to pay double when they got to California for the use of 3 oxen by the Graves and Breen families. Mr. Graves charged Mr. Eddy $25, which was the normal cost of 2 healthy oxen for the carcass of an oxen that had starved to death.
Isn't that crazy that it's $25 for an oxen alive?
For 2 healthy oxen.
Healthy. Okay, alive. And nowadays, you pay $800 for a half a fucking cow. Dead.
Yeah.
Like, people like to buy half a cow or a quarter of a cow.
Yep.
And you're paying $800 for a quarter or half. That's crazy. And there you get 2 for 25.
Yep. And he's getting 25 for a dead one that had starved to death. So it had very little meat on it. Everyone was desperate. Some reasoned that individuals might survive navigating the pass without wagons. In small groups, they made several attempts, but each time they had returned defeated. Another storm made its way to the camp, lasting more than a week. The area was covered in a snow so deep that their cattle and horses, which was their only remaining food, died and were lost buried in the snow. So they couldn't even eat that meat.
They couldn't even have that.
Yeah, they couldn't even find it. Patrick Breen began keeping a journal on November 20th. He kept a record of the weather, noting the storms and how much snow had fallen before it began to take on religious tones and reference as any hope of making it through to the other side of this journey became bleak. And
what do they mean by religious tones?
Like
doomsday?
Yeah, like
the coming of Christ?
Not so much that, but just he knew that they were going to die. Okay. So, when people are staring death in the face, they become super religious sometimes. Yep. Like trying to make everything right as they prepare for their death. So at least that's how I understood.
Yeah, I guess that makes sense. Yeah.
When I was researching this, I was looking at some of the photos, and they had pictures of the stumps of the trees that they had cut in their little camp area. Okay. For firewood or whatever. And it depicts how much snow had fallen. Like, a normal tree like here, and you'd have like a stump like this high. Yeah. Their stump was like way up here. That's how deep the snow is. They were cutting off the top of the tree.
Oh my gosh.
Yes. This is what they were surviving in.
Wow. Yeah. I guess that does paint a whole different picture.
And I'll post that picture in the video too. So you'll probably be looking at it right now. Life in those cabins was beyond miserable. They were cramped, filthy, and unable to go outside due to the snow. So think about bodily functions as well.
I was just
think about no bathing. Like,
think about 30 kids and 30 people in one tent or cabin.
Yeah. Yeah. They survived off of oxhide, strips of which they boiled to make it a disagreeable glue like jelly.
That sounds So amazing.
Ox and horse bones were boiled repeatedly to make soup, and they became so brittle that they would crumble upon chewing. The bones were sometimes softened by being charred in the fire and eaten that way. Little by little, the Murphy children picked at an oxhide rug that laid in front of their fireplace, roasted it, and ate it. Franklin Graves fashioned 14 pairs of snowshoes out of ox bows and hide. On December 16, a party of 17 men, women, and children set out on foot in an attempt to cross the mountain pass. They packed lightly, taking what had become 6 days' worth of rations, a rifle, a blanket each, a hatchet, and some pistols, hoping to make their way to Bear Valley. Mothers leaving some of their children behind in the care of others, proving what a grim choice they thought they had. Like, we have to leave and try to find help or everybody's going to die.
Yeah.
And having to leave your baby behind because you know they won't make the journey either.
That is
like
awful.
Just the choices to have to make.
Yeah.
Historian Charles McGlashan later called the snowshoe party the Forlorn Hope. 2 of those without snowshoes, Charles Berger and 10-year-old William Murphy, turned back early on. Other members of the party fashioned snowshoes for 12-year-old Lemuel Murphy on the first evening from one of the pack saddles that they were carrying. The snowshoes were awkward, but essentially effective on the climb. The members of the party were neither well-nourished nor accustomed to camping in the snow 12 feet deep. Jeez. And by the 3rd day, most of them were snowblind, because they don't have the proper sunglasses either.
Yeah.
On the 6th day, Mr. Eddy discovered his wife had hidden half a pound of bear meat in his pack. The group set out again the morning of December 21st, my mom's birthday. Stanton had been straggling behind for several days and decided to remain behind, claiming he would follow shortly. His remains were found at the location the following year. The group became lost and confused in the snow. After 2 more days without anything to eat, Patrick Dolan suggested one of them should volunteer to die in order to feed the others. Some suggested a duel, while another account describes an attempt at a lottery of sorts. Eddy suggested that they keep moving until someone simply fell, but a blizzard forced the group to stop. Antonio, the animal handler, was the first to die. Franklin Graves was the next. Dolan became delirious and stripped naked and ran off in the woods during a blizzard. He returned a little afterwards, but died a few hours later. Not too long after that, possibly because Murphy was near death, some of the group finally began to eat the flesh from Dolan's body. Lemuel's sister, Sarah, tried to feed him some of the meat, but he still died shortly afterwards. Mr. Eddy, the indigenous guide Salvador and Luis, refused to eat the meat. The next morning, the muscle and organs were stripped from the bodies of Antonio, Dolan, Graves, and Murphy. The meat was dried to store for the days ahead, but they made sure to keep it separated so no one would have to eat his or her relatives. After the small group rested for 3 days, they headed back out into the snow searching for the trail. Mr. Eddy eventually broke down and ate the human flesh, but even that was soon gone. They took apart their snowshoes to eat the oxhide webbing, but secretly plotted to murder Luis and Salvador for food, which just shows how much they value the indigenous people's lives.
Right.
But, I mean, they are the outsiders of the group, kind of. I mean, everybody else...
They don't have any emotional ties to them.
Yeah, everybody else is somebody's relative.
Yeah.
These are the outsiders.
Get that, but man, that sucks.
Yeah. Mr. Eddy, who he's the only decent person here, really. He warned the 2 men, and they discreetly left the party. So he didn't want them to be murdered.
Which is nice.
Jay Fostick died during the night. Their party was down to 7 people. Mr. Eddy and Mary Graves left to hunt and actually returned with deer meat. But in their absence, Jay Fostick's body had already been cut apart for food. 25 days since leaving Truckee Lake, they came across Salvador and Luis once more. The 2 men had not eaten for almost 9 days and were close to death. William Foster shot both men. They then butchered and dried the meat of the 2 men. Just a few days later, the small group stumbled into an indigenous settlement that had deteriorated so much that the camp's inhabitants initially ran. The indigenous people gave them what they had to eat: acorns, grass, and pine nuts. With the help of tribe members, Mr. Eddy continued to a ranch in a small farming community at the edge of the Sacramento Valley. They hastily assembled a rescue party and found the other 6 survivors on January 17th. Their journey from Truckee Lake had taken 33 days and cost them several lives.
Wow.
Of those remaining at the Truckee Lake camp, 2/3 were children. Mrs. Graves took charge of 8, while Lavina Murphy and Eleanor Eddy together took on the care of the other 9. They caught and ate mice that strayed into the cabins. Many were so weak they just remained in bed most of the day. Occasionally, someone would make the day-long trek down to see the Donners. They came to find that Jacob Donner and 3 of the hired men had died. One of them, Joseph Reinhardt, confessed on his deathbed that he had murdered Mr. Wolfinger, not that the indigenous people had attacked and killed him. George Donner's hand that had been sliced had now become infected, leaving only 4 men who could work at the Donner camp. Margaret Reed had managed to save enough food for a Christmas pot of soup to the delight of her children. But they were facing starvation and debated eating their oxhide roof by January. So, Christmas soup didn't last long.
No.
Especially when you're starving,
Oh, there's so many people.
Margaret Reed, Virginia Reed, Milt Elliott, and the servant girl Eliza Williams attempted to walk out, reasoning that it would be better to try to bring food back than to just sit around and watch the children starve. They traveled 4 days in the snow before they had to turn back. Their cabin was now uninhabitable. The oxhide that had served as their roof was the only food supply left. The family moved in with the Breens. The servants went to live with other families. One day, the Graves came to collect on the debt owed to them by the Reeds and took the last of the ox hides, all that the family had to eat. Their survival now seeming impossible.
Wow.
And this, my friends, is where we're going to leave off this week. This will be a 2-parter. I really wanted to make this into just 1 episode, but to cut any of their deaths or hardships out just seemed wrong. What these people went through, the choices they were forced to make, the fear they had to have for the lives of their children and loved ones. I literally was crying, like, just thinking about it as a mom.
Yeah.
Like,
oh yeah.
It seems more real now. It's hard not to put yourself in their shoes. Imagine what you would do to protect your baby and hoping that you never have to find out. Next week, we have our anniversary special, so please look forward to that. We have something really special planned. And please check out our Facebook page to enter for our anniversary merch giveaway. We've posted a video on our Facebook and our Instagram. Please comment on that, what your favorite episode that or case that we've covered. And we're going to do a drawing for some merch.
Yeah.
Then the following week, we will be back here to finish up the Donner Party in part 2. And that's that.
Yes. And for anybody really is following along, my dad did have open heart surgery. He was really literally on his deathbed. He is now home and he's doing great. And he's back to his old self, given, the open heart part of it, like his scars.
As much to his old self as he can be.
Yeah. Let's just say his old sarcastic self. His witty self. His
ornery self, yeah.
Yeah, talking shit self. So thank you for everybody who sent out positive vibes and things like that for me and my family. Happy to have him home. He was there for 30, I think he said 33 days.
That's a while.
Yeah. So he's home and he's doing fantastic. And yeah, that's just a little update for you guys. And I've been stressed about it. That's why Angela's been doing all the episodes, because I've been stressed about going and seeing my dad and going to school, and work is stressful. And I've been having a mental meltdown almost every day. But now that my dad's home, this semester's almost over. I'm getting A's.
Starting to smooth out.
I can go back to doing my research for my stuff. And I'm going to try to pick something really not fun, not necessarily upbeat, but
not fun.
It's
not going to be fun.
Something a little less depressing. It's all depressing, but a little less.
It is all depressing.
Dark and depressing. So, yeah. And I think I found one. She's awful, but her name makes me laugh. So we'll see.
If you have any stories you want us to cover, or if you have any ghost stories of yourself, or any glitches in the Matrix, any fairy fucking that's been going on in your bed.
We just found out about a new cryptid, so we'll be covering that sometime in the future.
Locally.
A local one.
Yeah.
So
we're excited for that.
Yeah. And we do have a surprise coming up for our anniversary.
Yeah, we're super excited. We're super excited.
I want to just shout it out, but no.
Yeah. So if you have those stories, send them to our email, which is spinechillingchatspodcast@gmail.com.
Yes.
Or you can go to our website, www.spine-chillingchatspodcast.com, and submit them there. You can also click on the link to see more episodes. You can click on the other link to get some merch. If you want to buy some shirts. They're pretty cool. Yeah. And these ones are our anniversary ones. So it says 1 year of keeping it spooky, May 1st, 2024. So check out some merch, buy some merch, support us. Please share, like, comment, subscribe, do it all. Do it twice.
We are on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, anywhere you can listen to podcasts.
Yeah, literally. We're everywhere.
And go check us out, guys.
Yeah. Well, we hope you guys enjoyed this. We hope you come back. And most of all, we hope you keep it spooky. Bye, guys.
Bye.